Let's talk about tools and the tools that I bring on my motorcycle tours. Now there's not just one set of tools that I bring. It's very modular depending on how far I go, what I do on the trip. And in this video, I'm just gonna talk about the different levels that I bring, all the way from sort of the easiest level 1 all the way to the full package. So if you're interested in that, stay tuned. What's up, my biker friends? Welcome back to another video. I've done a video already on how I pack my clothes and how I sort of efficiently pack everything, that it's lightweight and compact, but I did leave out the tool section because it kind of deserves its own video. Now, there isn't just one tool package that I bring. It's pretty modular, and I will go into the different levels of tools that I bring. And before you sort of switch off and say, well, I'm not very handy, I don't know how to fix anything on my motorcycle, why should I bring anything? Well, there's a good reason why you should, because depending on what motorcycle you ride, there may be special tools that only you have or only you should bring, and something happens, your bike breaks down, there's a good chance there are other people that can help you, but they may not have the right tools for it. So having a basic set of tools, even if you don't feel like you can fix it yourself, there's a good chance that you run into other people, and that's been the experience that I had in the past. If something went wrong, I wasn't there by myself, or whoever that happened to wasn't there by himself, so there were other people that could pitch in, they could help, and having the right tools or not having the right tools can be a problem. So that's why it kind of makes sense to think about something to bring so that others have a chance to help you. So I'm going to start very easy, but the easiest one, and then work my way up. So let's start with number 1, and that's this little card that you should bring. That was supposed to be a joke. It's actually not a joke. This is the mobility service, and a lot of manufacturers for the newer bikes, if they're in the first 1 or 2 years, in this case for KTM it's actually 4 years, if you keep bringing your bike to the service, you have a mobility guarantee. Now, it doesn't cover a whole lot, but just in case you break down somewhere, there's a phone number here that you can call, and they are promising that they would tow you to the next shop and hopefully give you a replacement vehicle. Now, I've had sort of a run-in with the KTM service. It's not that extensive, depends on who you go with. It might be better with other manufacturers, but it doesn't take up a lot of space and a lot of weight. I have that with me just in case. And there's other insurances that you can get. I have another insurance for my bike, so usually I tend to use that before I use this little card here. But if you've got nothing, then the very minimum that you should bring, you should have that little service card if you have a bike that's new enough that still is covered onto some kind of a mobility guarantee of any kind. So the next level up is, again, not even tools yet. It is these two things that are essentials. And that's just duct tape and zip ties. There's a very good chance that half of your issues can be fixed with one of these two things, either some tape or some zip ties. They're not really tools, but there's a lot of things that can fall off the bike, break off the bike, the screw comes loose. Having zip ties is a good thing. These are smaller zip ties that are part of my toolkit. I took them out. I have larger ones that I've actually mounted to the bike, so it's pretty easy to use them. Not really tools, but I bring them on any of my longer distance trips, and I've used these quite a bit, especially the tape part of it. I also bring a smaller roll of electrical tape that I usually have in my tank bag or in my jacket, and that's for the smaller stuff. Usually I use that for my video equipment if I need to sort of attach the video equipment somewhere, so that's mostly what it's used for. But the bigger stuff is for something that sort of breaks on the bike, falls off. You can use the tape and fix a lot of things with it. So number 3 is finally the toolkit, the actual tools, and now it really depends on what kind of bike you ride, what manufacturer of bike you have, how many tools you get as part of your bike. Now, if you ride a BMW, it's very likely that this is the only tool that you get. I think it's a screwdriver and a little more. This is actually a KTM screwdriver, but I think you get very, very little for BMW. Not sure exactly why that is. Maybe there's 2 reasons. Maybe BMW thinks there's nothing that ever breaks on their bikes, or BMW doesn't think that BMW riders can fix their own stuff. I don't know what the reason is. Now, if you're riding a KTM, there's a good chance you get a pretty comprehensive tool set. These are parts of the tools that I got with my KTM. I added a few things, and I'll talk about those things that I've added, but there's a lot in the package where you can do the basic stuff. So anything comes off the fairing, any kind of screws that you have. There's like little sort of bits in here that came with the package. And there's a lot of things that you can fix with it. I have some spare parts in here too. There's some fuses that I have in here. There is some sort of spare screws that I've collected over time. And then this longer piece here is actually some Loctite. Also something, if some of the screws falls off, that's Loctite in here. And I'll go into some of the other things in a second. But it's a pretty comprehensive tool. You can do most of the maintenance work with the toolkit. And one good way of finding out if you need a tool or if you don't need a tool is if you do your routine maintenance things that you do on your bike yourself and just use that little kit. It's not the best quality tools, but just use them and see if something's missing. Add a few things that weren't in the package. And I'll talk about the things that I've added and changed out in a second. This is sort of the KTM orange pliers that came with the set. They're actually pretty decent quality. I took them out anyway because I replaced them with two other things that I have in my hand here, and these are thin nose pliers. I find those a lot more useful when working on the bike, and having thin nose pliers like this somehow, like I said, when I did the maintenance work, is something that worked a lot better for me than sort of the bigger one here. And then I also have these. These are sort of a miniature wrench. They're adjustable in width, so they're pretty helpful having two of those things in there. So I've got these two for this as a replacement. I've added a knife. This is just a small knife that I can use to cut stuff with. And there's another thing that I've added in. These are very thin, sort of lightweight, thin profile, because when I worked on the bike, I noticed that I use these quite a bit. If you have your mirrors that you want to adjust and a few things that you cannot reach otherwise, these are good to have. And there's a few that come with the pack, but I have a sort of a complete set now, and they're super lightweight, so I added them to the pack. Also, that basically replaces anything that a Leatherman tool could do. I'm not a huge fan of Leatherman tools. I know a lot of people suggest Leatherman tools because technically there's a lot of stuff in it, but none of it really works really well. The plier part is not very good. The knife is not very good. Any of the screwdrivers doesn't really work well. So I'd like to have separate tools and then just leave the Leatherman tool at home and don't bring it on tour. So for number 4, it is some chain loop and WD-40. I have these smaller cans here, and at the moment they're double wrapped in Ziploc bags because the last time I had these packed, they were pretty close to my clothing. So I just want to make sure none of the stuff leaks. The WD-40 is something that I use to clean the chain. It's also good for other things, but the WD-40 is good for the chain cleaning. Something I didn't bring on earlier trips, and it was really difficult to clean the chain. If it gets really dusty and dirty, especially when you start to ride sort of gravel roads or off-road, it's hard to get that sand and dust off, especially if you've used very sticky sort of chain loop. And then the chain loop, this is a small can of regular road chain loop that I use. This is the smallest setup that I have, and I try to re-loop every, let's say, 1,000 kilometers on the regular runs. If I'm going off-road through rain or water crossings, that's a lot shorter. It's like 500 kilometers or even every day. So I was using that quite intensively on my Iceland trip, and that's why it's still packed like this. The next thing that I bring is some sort of tire puncture kit, and I have 2 tire puncture kits. There's one that actually sits on the bike under the seat cover, and that is it's called a diner plug. It's a small little capsule that has all the tools, very, very compact, and I've only had to use it one time, and that was during the Trans-Italia Marathon, where 4 of us had issues with sort of nails going into the tire. I think we're suspecting someone didn't like motorcycles going through the backyard basically, and they lost a bunch of screws on the track. So it was 4 of us that had nails, and there was 2 of us that actually had proper punctures. So after thousands of kilometers, this is the first time that I had a puncture in there, and I used the diner plug. the Dynaplug system, which is sort of the fastest way of sort of plugging a tubeless tire. And typically what I have with the Dynaplug, or the Dynaplug that's sitting under the seat, so if I bring nothing else, that stays with the bike all the time, and it comes with CO2 cartridges. Now typically you get small CO2 cartridges, you know, if you have a set that you buy, they're typically made for bicycles. So what I did, I got these larger ones. This is a larger sort of 60 gram CO2 cartridge. What you typically get in the sets are 20 gram cartridges. You need 3 of those to fill up a motorcycle tire. You just need 1 of them to fill up the tire. So I have 2 of those in there. I've got a special valve that I can sort of adjust the flow. If you have the really cheap ones, then there's no adjustment of flow. They just pump the CO2 into the tire. So I wanted something to adjust it. And that's something that sits with the bike. Nice and easy. It isn't necessarily the most durable way of fixing a tire. It gets you out of this situation, and for the Trans-Italian Marathon I had to sort of refill the tire basically every day until I had to fix it again, but it gets you going again. Then I have another set that I have in my hand here, and that's the sort of typical sort of little I don't know what they're called, the little plugs that go in here, and typically use them with the tool. I now have it sort of taped off because it's pointy, so if you have a hole in your tire, you basically clean out the hole and then you stick one of these in there. And there's 2 methods. There's it's gotten really difficult. There's usually some kind of what's it called, like a tire cement or something, a little tube of sort of glue or something that's in there. That's pretty good, and there's a lot more that you can fix with it. So we had an incident on the ACT in Italy when we were riding, and Jochen, he had a puncture. It wasn't from a screw, but it was a little piece of rock, and it was more like a tear in the tire. And it looked so big that we weren't quite sure if we were able to fix it. And so we didn't have these plugs here. We had, this is from a BMW set. And you can do different plugs. So the idea is always the same. You plug the hole with these sets, but we had 3 of those. We had the glue, and we didn't think it was gonna work, but it did. So we stuck them all in there, and it didn't look like it was gonna hold, but it did. It was enough to get off the mountain, to get to a proper tire store, and then have it all fixed. So it's good to have options, especially when you're far off of civilization. So if you do like an off-road trip or something, and you need to get out of that sort of off-road section first before you can find something that, a tire store or something that can help you. So that's why I have a bit more. This is sort of the set that I bring on longer tours, just to have an option to fix a tire. If, of course, you have a tire that has a tube in there, you're looking at completely different tool sets. You need tire irons, and you need to have the tool sets to sort of remove one of the wheels and get onto that. Most adventure bikes now have tubeless tires, but there's a few, like the popular Yamaha Tenere 700, I think that still has tubes in there, and there's a few other models. But most adventure bikes, the big ones, they have tubeless tires. So it's a pretty light setup. It's not much, this is all I'm bringing, and I put this in a Ziploc and bring it with me. Now, because I don't want to use the CO2 cartridges if I can avoid it, these are really just a backup that sit under my motorcycle seat. And for that, I have a little battery-powered tire pump, and that's excellent. I've used a tire pump, especially on off-road trips. When you sort of air down the tires, then you have a chance to air it down. Plus, sort of what the pressure is. There's a pressure measure in here. So if you don't have modern larger bikes where you have the tire pressure in your display, which I do have in mine, but if you don't have that, then you can sort of measure the tire pressure, but it also helps you once you get out of the off-road section to refill the tire, so you have the proper tire pressure when you're riding on tarmac again. This came in really, really helpful. Well, of course, you have a flat tire. This is what I use to refill my flat tire and a friend's flat tire. So it's a good thing to have. These things are not very expensive, and this is something that on longer trips I usually take with me. I also had an incident in Iceland, actually, where I had a stranded SUV. There was a family on one of the sort of remote sort of off-road tracks sitting there. I think they were somewhere from, not quite sure, Peru, Colombia, I'm not quite sure where they were from, South America, and it was 2 little kids and a family sitting there, and they were stranded with a flat tire. And you know, I stopped. I didn't know what was happening at the time. I asked him what the problem was, and it seemed like he had a flat tire. So that thing was actually enough to fill up an SUV car tire, not fully, but enough that these guys could get going again. So this thing came in quite helpful a lot of times, and it's still running strong. I just make sure I keep it charged. It's a USB-C charging thing, so I charge it before I go on the trip, and then I have it ready to go. Now the next item on the list is something that I've used quite a few times now in the recent years, and that's a 2-component epoxy. It's called Quick Steel JB Weld. I think for the Americans, they know this. So it's epoxy, 2 components, and that thing fixes a lot of the hard metal parts. So we had a few occasions where we had punctures in the engine case. The last incident that happened was actually last fall in October when we went to the West Alps. It was an on-road trip, so nothing crazy off-road, but there was a rock that deflected off the front wheel and it hit the engine guard or the splash guard and took one of those screws, and that screw basically punctured the engine case, and there was oil leaking out. And we were in the middle of the Col de la Madeleine at 2,000 meters in the clouds in single-digit temperatures, and typically a damage like this is the end of the ride. You know, if you got nothing with you, this stops the ride. You need to get your bike towed, and for whoever's riding the bike, that's the end of the trip. And this happened on the 3rd day. Luckily, we had this stuff here to fix it. It's usually not the only thing. This is what I had in the beginning. You know, as I started using it, there's a few other things that you need. So I have a little bit of sort of sandpaper with me that I'm bringing. This is just regular, what is it, 320 grain sandpaper. It makes it a lot easier if you can sort of sand the area, depending if it was sort of painted before or if there's any dirt on it, because you have a much better chance that epoxy is going to stick. Also, you need something to keep it oil free. So if you have sort of brake cleaner, or what we used in the West Alps was some disinfectant spray. That's also like an alcohol mix. So just making sure that you get the grease off, and then you have sandpaper to sort of prepare the surface. Then you have the best chances of fixing any kind of hole. If you got a bigger puncture, bigger hole in it, you can use a coin, you know, a couple of euros that you can use, and then you can try to sort of fix it around a larger hole. So there's a lot of possibilities where you can use this, and I have used or we have used as a group to get us out of a difficult situation. So this is definitely coming with me on longer trips, and I hope I never need it again, but I was always glad that I had it. Okay, next thing is something, again, very low tech, and it's just some of these things you see they're still wrapped. I haven't used them yet, but it's just sort of extra belts that I can use either to, you know, if something breaks on the bike, to fix it on the bike, but it's also, I can use that for towing. We've towed a motorcycle with these little things. So it's something that I bring on longer trips if we're going off-road. You know, if there's a chance, if a bike breaks down that I need to tow a bike, these are the things that are coming with me. So pretty low-tech stuff. I don't bring it on every trip, but on an off-road trip, this is usually part of the package. So again, pretty close to the end. This is the latest addition to my set, and it is a starter kit. It's just a lithium battery and starter cables, just in case you have a weak battery or someone drains their battery. This is a very good way to get a bike back started again. Now, it's something that I've had happened a few times now on my own bike. That's why I never needed it, but I've seen it on other bikes. So the last time this happened was the West Alps last October. When Dave basically forgot to turn off his accessory lights. You know, he can turn them on without having the battery turned on. And we went to lunch, and it drained his battery. And normally this can strand you. And, you know, it takes a while to find someone to get your bike started again. So if you got a little sort of kit like this, they can help you out. First time I've ever used it was also in the West Alps, but that was an off-road trip. And it was Thomas at the time. He had a weak battery, and same thing, he was basically in an off-road track in a really bad position that the only way to get the bike started would have been with a battery pack, and there was enough people of us. Valle actually had one of these things with him, and if he hadn't had that, that would have been a very, very difficult spot to get out of. Even towing the bike would have been quite difficult. So I figured if I'm going on these guided tours now and someone has battery issues, I'll be prepared, and I'll be happy to bring one of these things. Last but not least, there's 2 items that I bring on every long trip. And the first one is a first aid kit for the motorcycle. This is actually a brand new one because you're supposed to replace them every so often. I think they have an expiration date on them, so I just got this one new, especially since I'm doing a bunch of guided tours now. I wanted to make sure I have an updated sort of first aid kit. The other item is this thing here. That's the high visibility vest. That is mandatory in some European countries like Austria. They usually come in the package for me. On any long trip, I bring the first aid kit and the high visibility vest. That's it. That's a lot of stuff to bring. So I've got the maximum setup going into all my guided tours this year, of course, because I want to be prepared. Of course, you can bring a lot more stuff, and I'd be actually interested if you have items that you bring that I don't have on my list, or there are things on there that you say, well, you know, that's too much. I wouldn't bring that much stuff. Leave your comments in the comment section. I'd be quite interested of what you have to say. I hope that was interesting and helpful, give you some ideas what you can bring on your bike. I'll see you in the next video. Until then, ride safe and stay awesome.